Hey, welcome. Fine Line Fridays. Myself, Will Riley, Chad Westbrook. Chad, how you doing today, man?
Yo, yo, I'm doing good. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. We made it through yet another week. And these are always really fun to do because, I just stopped what I was doing, working on the business and or working in the business, which is what we do all day, every day. And then I paused for 30 minutes to chat with my friend Chad, where we get to pick apart some meaningful topics, some discussions, so we could help contractors and ourselves work on the business. I wanted to kind of start off because as more and more people are watching these podcasts, whether it's Spotify or YouTube or the Facebook Live and any other platforms that it's being shared on, but who are we? Why are we doing this? And why should anyone hear what it is we have to say? I'll start with you, Chad. Give us just a general timeline of your time within the roofing industry.
Oh man, direct as can be. Who am I? All
Hmm.
right, so yeah, I can give you some background on it. So I've been in commercial roofing pretty much my entire life. I did a little bit of CAD and construction framing, different things like that when I was young, right? Hustling for cash. But originally started, and I'll just fast forward, right? It started when ultimately FCS, before it was FCS or Facility Control Systems, which is now connected into Java. I mean, that's where everything started for me. Had the opportunity to do some telemarketing calls, inside sales, and really kind of grow within that and within a partnership that was happening between a roofing company and the software, which got me into like basically what I didn't even know, right? Like looking back in this, it's cool to look back at it. But fast forward, I had an opportunity to be able to implement some of the largest roofing contractors in the US. And when I say implement, I mean take the technology and put it into their business. So like I was learning all of these processes, all these ways of doing things. I was like learning all of these industry best practices, and I didn't even know. So about 2012, I got the opportunity to take a step outside of the technology side and into the roofing world. Did it with a company based out of Oklahoma. Was there for about 3.5 years. And my real objective, looking back on it now that it's super clear, is that they were a massive new construction company. And that's really what their business was. And they wanted a service division or divisions, plural, put inside place to be able to service all those roofs that they were putting on throughout the US, with a secondary goal of creating real cash flow that can bring in cash and profit and revenue on a weekly basis rather than waiting for obviously the draws or retention or anything else that comes up. So 3.5 years, opened up seven branches, seven different branches, doing a little less than 4 million, 100% service, and then takes me into kind of my primary. I joined a company out of the Midwest. They were about 80 million at that time, where I took the role of director of national accounts and grew it to a little less than 20 million over 5.5 years. Opened up 4 or 5 new branches for them, and then oversaw and managed the transition of a few branches as well. So that was a huge, huge part, right? Growing from 0 to 20 million and being able to do it on a national side as well as local. Big background on my side, so really seeing all parts of the business. And then my last role before jumping onto my own and joining you guys here on Fine Line Friday was a company based out of Dallas. And they focused a lot on higher education, a lot of government stuff, different things like that. So a whole different world for me, but still a pretty similar objective. I was there to be able to flip the amount of hard bid to negotiated work that they were doing. And that's what my objective was to be able to use service as a platform to be able to create more private negotiated opportunities so they get more private negotiated replacements and can rely less on that kind of hard bid hoax world where we're bidding big huge projects and we got to win them to make our year, where it gets a little bit more consistent. So it's hard to kind of give you guys all of my background, but I've been inside a lot of different areas. My focus has always been commercial roofing with an exact, I'll say, focus on service as the foundational part of the business. So I tried to
Yeah,
say
I love it.
as best as I could.
No, you did. And in short, really, outside in, started with single location, right? Opening a brand new service effort. So that's what I'd say single territory, then a national presence, and then also another single territory. And then now you're tapped into the industry probably more than ever because you're talking with a lot of contractors.
This.
Now, like Chad, I came from the outside in as well. I wasn't born into the roofing industry, but my dad kind of pulled me in at a younger age. But full transparency, I've known Chad since we were teenagers, right? And we both started on that
I
side.
remember fifth grade Will. So
Yeah, but it's really neat, starting on that side and getting some opportunities to learn the industry from, like I said, the outside in, meaning working with contractors, understanding how each of the different types of companies operate. And there's so many shapes and sizes. It's a wonderful thing. Implementing software. Outside in, we started by figuring out or learning how decisions are made. Facility managers making decisions whether or not to move forward on a project or a repair or a service initiative or a large inspection initiative, whatever it is. Obviously, my dad created FCS, which came from Roof Options. That exposed us to a lot of contractors. I stuck around. 2012, you left and went into the roofing side. I stuck around until 2017. I got to work with a few hundred commercial roofing contractors at an intimate level where they would invite me in and open their books, open their processes, and together figure out what makes the most sense, how to implement the software into the business. But much like Chad, I gravitated or loved the service side of it because what I noticed is all the companies that were service leading had retention, had recurring revenue, had more opportunities, had larger profitable jobs come through just because they were working and take care of a client base. So I loved that idea. Now, 2017, I transitioned from outside to in. I worked for a contractor out of Fort Worth, pretty close to where you were, Chad. So 2017, they were doing 12 million in total sales, all negotiated re-roofs. Minimal service effort really to chase warranties, but the whole idea was we need to shift this around, create a service leading initiative. And I was brought on as director of business development. We went from 500,000 in service to 3.5 million in 3 year period of time. But as an impact, we went from 12 million to 28 million in total sales. And not all of that came from service, but a lot of it did. So it was really cool to experience that. But I had to learn roofing really quick. Day one, I'm invoicing jobs. I have no idea what these materials are and if they're correct. So like a sponge, I'm absorbing from the technicians, which is a beautiful thing in itself. Techs are always willing and able to share. But a couple years in, I'm like, man, we need something that's going to better our business software wise. I know a lot of the software in the market. I did deep dives, piecing things together. Ultimately ended up building this center point. And at the time, it wasn't even intended to go to market. I just know we needed a solution. But I became attached to it. And I'm like, man, this thing's got to go to market. We have to help other contractors. So 2020, I did just that. I flipped the software side again. So from software to roofing back to software, now we're working with hundreds of contractors and really pushing ourselves to try to continue to stay in tune with best practices. A lot of it is service leading initiatives. Not to say we don't work with other types of contractors, because we do. But that's really our motivation, mine and Chad's motivation, is how do we continue to contribute to the industry, raise the floor, communicate, have some awesome conversations. But we wanted to start with some background on us because we've got a wide audience that's now listening that had no idea who Will is or who Chad is. So last week we talked about account managers versus sales reps, and we had a great conversation. We picked it apart. But this week we wanted to dive deeper into the account management side. Why account managers? How do you perhaps compensate? What are the duties of an account manager? Why have account managers? So we'll start with this, Chad. I'll ask you, an account manager from your standpoint, is that something that you start out or contractors start out by having, or is that something that's more like grown into as it unfolds?
Man, so there's a lot of terminology that is tossed around, especially like when you're hiring, because I think this goes all the way back to like when you bring someone on board, we want to make sure that at the end of the day, they're performing the job that their title says, right? And like I've heard tons of different things like put manager inside the title, put all of this different stuff in the title, and to me, I'm probably more of a realist than anything else. So when you talk about account manager, right? Like you're just starting off, to me, it's pretty simple. It's an account manager. Like you are managing an account. And if we don't have an account, we got to go get an account, right? Now, chances are, if you're a business, you do have people who are giving you work, right? That justifies an account. Now, how big is that account? That's something that I call grow versus scale, right? So like, what's the account worth? How much money do they do? All of that stuff, which we'll get into. But I think at the black and white side of it, you have a sales rep, right? That's out there hunting, finding new work, growing the business with new
Mm.
blood. And then you have an account manager that is there to be able to scale or get more from who you have. Does that make sense?
It does, and variances of it too. Sometimes it's like one and the same person. Sometimes it's two different people. Sometimes it's three, where you have like a coordinator supporting that effort. And I'd love to kind of dive into that. And you've seen it starting from one location to a national like presence, where you need a lot of people, and they need to be on the same page. Then down to a local level. Uh, but yeah, it makes absolute sense. So yeah, continue on. Sorry.
Well, no, it's okay because like inside my head, I'm thinking of like even like the business development side, right? So like we'll go that way. So you have sales, which can be sales rep, it could be account manager, it could be regional sales, it could be regional sales manager, it can be all of these different titles. But to me, that's just noise, right? We got to get really, really specific on does the title match what the individual is doing? And then I say, even like on I'll say business development, telemarketing, sales development rep. At the end of the day, a lot of times those job descriptions are nearly the same, right? Business development is there to be able to cultivate new business. Well, is that a sales rep or where is it? And I say this to everybody here because you have to get clear on what titles you have within your business and how they contribute to that sales process. And that's why I love that we're going through this, right? Because if I was to define it myself, let's just say business development, right? They're there to be able to cultivate opportunities for you guys to be able to grow the business. Now, a sales rep might be someone who is selling new customers, and an account manager might be someone who is really making a relationship with somebody, right? And working on obtaining more of the work that they already are giving out, right? So maybe it's a company that's got 15 locations locally. In my opinion, that would be something where an account manager would step in and say, okay, how do we get all 15 locations, or how do we get a certain amount of their spend? Where it's really more of a strategic relationship rather than just a, hey, call me when a leak comes up.
Yeah, no question. And I think that if you took that same example where, let's say you're working with a customer and they have one building that you're constantly on, but they own 24 other buildings, how does it make sense to get in front of those or get on those other buildings? And a lot of what we talk about is by doing what we say inventorying those buildings. When we talk about inventorying those buildings, we're talking about doing inspections and gathering basic data, right? Age of roof, grade of roof, total amount of repairs, what's the replacement, gathering it and then reviewing it with that customer. Now that might be the account manager doing that review, makes the most sense, especially if you want your sales or hunters continuing to grab new opportunity. But if that new opportunity came to the table, now we got to expand within that opportunity. And that's where account managers really come into play, is managing that relationship, making sure they don't leave, making sure that internally too, we're delivering, right? If we sold something, we got to make sure the crew goes out, they do it the right way, that the customer's happy. So closed loop resolution, and then continuing to extract more opportunity in that same customer. What we did is immediately shifted at the roofing company. We shifted from having sales reps on the business cards to account managers. They did both roles, but they had a big book of business already, so we weren't really looking to get out and get new business. It's like we want to do more work with the schools, more work with the existing facility managers, more work with the restaurant groups that we worked with. And a big way of looking at it was they were helpers. They when you see account manager on a business card, it's like your guard goes down. I think we all could agree to that. We thought of them as helpers, and they were tasked to go out into the market and educate their customers on how to make informed roofing decisions. I know you did a lot of that, but for you it was kind of different, right? Because you had sales people separate than the ones that were managing it. What was your breakout there?
Man, it was different in every company, right? Because every company had their own process, they had their own people, it was their own structure, right? So in the national side, and I always think of this as a career ladder, right? It might be right, it might be wrong, but I definitely want to give all of my employees their next step because if they don't know what their next step is, a lot of times they leave because they think something better is down the road if we can't give them that vision. Whole different topic to talk about. But right, it would start out as SDR, sales development rep, right? And that was equivalent to a telemarketer, so I went inside that side. Then once you got a hold of the system, once you got a hold of all of the different facets, activities, opportunities, the CRM system, all that stuff, then you would move into inside sales. And then from inside sales, you would ultimately move into outside sales or a national account manager. And that's how the sales side went. And outside sales or our national account manager was really based upon the type of individual they were, right? We all know those people that like being outside, they want to be active, right? And that's kind of a face-to-face extrovert side where your account management side, I'm not saying it's introverted, but it definitely is showing up, sitting at an office. You're in an office all day, which some people go crazy in that world. So it's hard to say, okay, this is the black and white of how it is. But I will say that again, I could think just going back to it, you guys need to define within your business what titles are there, right? So I do love the fact that you chose account manager because it lowered the guard of like I'm going to be sold something compared to you're going to work with me, right? Like, are we a team? Like, I always use the word trusted advisor. And the way I explain it is that we sit on the same side of the table as them. We solve the same problem as them to where when I think of someone who's not a trusted advisor, they're going to be sliding a paper across the desk saying, hey, sign this. We're sliding the paper sideways saying, hey, take a look at this, right? We're helping them solve the problem. We're helping them get to a goal. So there's a lot, I think, psychologically that goes into this that like you said, it can lower the fence. It can be a great way, but we also don't want to confuse our reps based upon the title they have and what their deliverables to the company are.
Yeah, yeah. A big part of this too is, especially if you want to grow through service, what that means is you're doing business repetitively with existing customers. And if you want to scale that side of the business, you need to kind of change the motive from sales, all right, got to quote, got to sell, got to close, to how do I maintain these customers? How do I make it so they never want to leave? And the best way that we've been able to do that is by gathering information as it sits and reviewing that with the customer. Now, we would not put any replacement bids out unless the customer has seen a budget number, has a level of a degree of likelihood of needing the roof and being able to award the project or at least bring it to a board. But before that, even we would only give one bid. And this was like something that Dustin ingrained into my head, and I don't necessarily think it's right or wrong. We would only give one bid based on that specific roof and that specific roof's needs and the customer's needs. We wouldn't give four different quotes. All right, you got a tear off option, you got an overlay option, you could code it, you could go over the walls, you could terminate 8 inches, whatever. But by doing that, it really changed the entire culture, I want to say, of the company, because then the reps guards lower because they're not looking to fire off the next highest dollar. It's like, no, they got to earn it through information sharing, bringing a client up to speed, and then having the client make a decision, sitting shoulder to shoulder with the client, just like you said.
Yeah.
So for contractors that are, this is a hard hurdle to overcome, though, and I see it all the time. Everyone's used to selling. And when you get into this world, it's completely different. Maybe let's talk about when you're transitioning over into this account management world, it changes the company too. It's a big change.
It does. So when you talk about selling, right? Again, when I think of growing my business, I'm getting really wide. I'm putting more people in it, right? I'm getting really wide. And when I think about scaling my business, that means I'm getting really deep with it. So it might just be one account, right? Now use an example, maybe a bad example, but CBRE, right? It's like, oh yeah, everybody will tell me, yeah, I work with CBRE. It's like, okay, cool. My first question is, how many of those property managers at CBRE do you work with versus how many do they have within that division, right? So you talk about the DFW Metro, like how many property managers at CBRE are there and how many do you work with? That's the first measurable to understand right? Are you getting all as much spend as you possibly can, right? So it's not CBRE, you're never going to have 100% of it, but understanding what that could be worth, right? You might have one account that can literally make your entire year as far as your goal happen because they spend that much money. The question is, are they spending it with you? Right. So that's kind of the account management
Um,
side. But what really is going through my head, I think, is what was kind of baked into us from the beginning, which is the data cell, right?
yeah.
To,
Yeah,
to
no doubt the data cell. And that's like literally where we came from and all we knew. And then we get into these businesses, we're like, whoa, there's this completely other side. How do we kind of mesh the two? And you've got different experiences than I do trying to mesh the two. You're completely right.
I mean, it comes back to the data cell. So there's a couple different things. So one, you were talking about inventorying, right? The term that I was always told was stock the shelves, right? Your customer can't buy anything from you if they don't have anything to buy from you, right? And that's the build the book of business, right? That's the sell, get out there, quote everything, inventory everything you can, because it's true. If you don't quote it, you'll never have it. But then there's a completely different side of that, which is what I call the data cell. So the one question that I always ask, and this is for every inspection I do, this is for every preventative maintenance I do, anything like that. The one question I always ask is, what do you plan to do with this information? If I put together an inspection for you, what do you plan to do with it? Right? So Will, what do you see, right? When I ask that question, what do you see? Like you're doing an inspection for someone, and I'd be like, hey, Will, have no problem putting this inspection together for you. What do you plan to do with the data once I bring it to you? What do you see as far as
Yeah,
like
it's such
common things?
yeah, wide array too, because this ranges from doing inspections for people who don't have never seen that format of your inspection
Hmm.
all the way to regularly seeing your format of doing an inspection. And the format of inspections in itself could vary. But when what you and I are talking about is the data cell. And if I sum it up, it's we need a life expectancy. We need total of open repairs. What's the sum of all open repairs? What's the sum of all future repairs? And what's the budget for replacement? Like that's essentially what Chad and I are talking about, being the data cell. And then taking that to a customer. Now, what do they do with it? That ranges in itself. I'm talking to building owners or contractors are talking with building owners where they're going to go do an inspection and they wonder what is the client going to do with it. Sometimes it's do I charge for it or not comes to question. Do I charge
Hmm.
for it as a consultant? Are they selling the building? Is it the building owner collecting three bids? But a lot of the time that if somebody was asking for a re-roof quote, chances are your first, second, or third, or whatever. But by doing that data cell and slipping that in, changed the whole process because we were the only ones coming in with the data cell. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think I always go into it saying don't do an inspection unless you have a commitment from a decision maker to review that with you at a minimum.
So you're yes, 100%. And where my head's at is that we have to stock the shelves. Cool with that because we don't quote it, we'll never have it. But the question that I ask, and not but, it should be and the question that I ask is, what do you plan to do with the data? And their answer is so influential to how I build the report because it could be, "Yeah, I just want to know the condition of the roof. It could be, I'm going to use it for budgets next year. It can be, I'm going to sell the building. I just want to understand what kind of hit I'm going to take. It can be, I just need to get it to my boss because he asked. It could be, I need to do it for the manufacturer's warranty. It said that I have to do it. But it
Mm.
doesn't matter. Like whatever the answer is where you guys get and this is where the account manager to me comes in. Based upon how they're going to use that data, right? Because Will, you said it, right? Like if I do a core cut, does that make a difference to you? Some clients would be like, "What's a core cut?" Other ones would be like, "Yeah, I want a core cut done because of da da da," right? Because that's instantly telling you how well that client understands the data and how they're going to use it, right? Do you care about observations? Do you care about deficiencies, right? Because if he just wants to understand if they're going to try to screw him over on putting a new roof on the building he's going to sell next month, and that's all he wants the inspection for, Well, you never had a service opportunity to begin with. So like that to me is one of the biggest things that my account manager needs to do is understand how the client uses the information that we give them. Right? And I don't mean to be mean about this, but like anybody can fix a roof leak. Right? Like that's a commodity within our industry, right? Someone can go up there with duct tape and fix a roof leak. But the question is, right, the data that I'm going to give you, the repair process, the before and after photos, all of this different stuff, how are you going to use it? And in my world, that's where the account manager comes in. He's helping them navigate the data that they have to achieve the goal that they're trying to get to or solve the problem that they have. I know that was really,
No,
really deep, but does that align with what you're thinking or how you think?
oh, exactly. Like 100%, because what it does is it changes it from selling to what are you choosing? Stocking the shelves, it's a concept of, if you've been on all these buildings and you gather all of the opportunities on that building, even though you might not be focused on something that's wrong over there or something that's wrong over there, I'm here to quote this skylight, or this small section of the roof because this is what they're complaining about. Inventorying or doing life cycle is scanning in, and this is like the best way I can put it. It's like take this phone, this iPhone, and think of it as a barcode scanner, right? And I'm walking the roof and I'm scanning in all of these deficiencies, pop, 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 and I'm assigning a SKU next to each repair. I'm assigning a price. It's on the shelf. Next, scan, shelf. Next, scan, shelf, and repeat. And break that up by section and put a life expectancy on it. Put a budget for replacement on it. That's the data cell. Because when you stock the shelves, then you deplete your inventory through various sales channels, whether it's through the account manager or salespeople or whoever's reviewing it with the customer. But if you take that data, you review it with the customer, they're just kind of picking their options, and there's no like sale even to it. And that's what we want for everybody to have, but it takes a long time to get there, to understand it, to put the right people in the right places. When Chad's talking about account managers, you might have people that are already doing parts of this role. And for each contractor, it could be different positions equal account manager, or maybe it's the salesperson and the account manager. Maybe it's a coordinator plus the salesperson plus the account manager. If you were to summarize or bullet out the different tasks, maybe this will help people kind of dissect and relate to it. Like, what are the tasks of an account manager, and how do they so if they know how the client's going to use the data to from the inspection, what are the various tasks involved with an account manager?
Every account is different, right? But if we talk about the core function of it as we go through, they're there to be able to ensure the client gets what they're looking for, right? So something was said to me a long, long time ago, wasn't super long ago, but if you work for your customer's customer, right? That's something that my account manager has to know. And I'll say this example, high level, a grocery store, right? We don't work for the grocery store chain. We work for the customer that's walking down the aisle. Because if the customer can't walk down the aisle and buy something from that aisle, they're going somewhere else, right? That's my goal. Inside self-storage, we work for the person that puts their stuff in that building, right? Now, I don't work for the self-storage company. I work for the individual that has his stuff in there. And as long as I can help that, right? It's like the Zig Ziglar. You can have whatever you want as long as you help somebody else get what they want. That's always the mindset that I'm putting behind a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
stuff that my account managers. What is it that they really want? They don't want a roofer, right? No, sorry to say it, nobody wants a roofer. They need a roofer. They have to have a roofer, right? And like when you were talking about the barcode stuff, the definition, and this is my definition, right? But the definition of a failing roofing system or a failing roof system is when water gets past that first line of defense, the membrane. Doesn't matter if it's a pinhole, a 10-foot open seam, a curb corner, wherever it is, that's a deficiency where that system is not performing as it was originally installed to. So the real question is when you guys inventory all of those little deficiencies, it's only a question of when it's going to leak, right? Or what way the wind needs to be blowing to be able to get in, and how much water has to get in for it to travel through that entire system to be able to show up as a roof leak. So when it rains inside DFW, I don't have to wonder what roof leaks are happening. My data tells me what deficiencies we have. And the real question is, did enough water get through that deficiency to actually show up in our client's world? And I know I'm not answering your question directly, but that's what an account manager does, right? An account manager knows what's happening before the client knows it's happening. They're managing that account. They're understanding that there's certain assets or whatever it is are at risk. So an account manager is there to be able to manage and grow relationships. Most of the time, those relationships are already somewhat created, right? You can still, like CBRE, example, we might have 5 property managers from CBRE, and maybe there's 20. Well, that's great. That account manager is going to go get those other 15, right? So it's not saying they're not selling, right? But an account manager to me is someone who is solely focused on getting as much of the share of wallet as they can from that account. Again, doesn't mean
Yeah.
they're not going after more, doesn't mean they're not finding additional people within that or whatever it might be. But to me, that's really what the primary position is, as we separated last week, right? Sales rep versus account manager.
Yeah, or whatever percentage you deem comfortable with that client. Because if it's a low percentage, you're at risk, right? A low
Uh,
percentage of
Yeah, and again,
buildings.
there's a lot of variables for it, right? They have one building and you're the contractor and you got 100% of the money they spend. That's beautiful. Let's just maintain it, right? You can still be an account manager for that. You just got to maintain it because you're already getting a share of wallet that is beyond or at expectation. Now you get into a
Mm,
different property manager, right? They might have an 80-20 rule, which means they can't give more than 80% of their work to one contractor, which means you'll never have 100%. And then you got bigger ones where you might be one of three. Now you got 33%, right? Like those are the different things that we're looking at because 100% is rarely achievable. We got to figure out
right.
what is logical and real, right? And it's all about little tweaks within that role that get you the massive return.
Well, the best way to pull this off and to get more wallet size, as you say, with the current customer is through the data sell. And the
Mhm.
beautiful thing about account managers is they don't need to be roofing experts. As a matter of fact, most of the time, they're not. They need to be good at taking care of customers. They need to understand the data, and over time, they understand roofing. But that doesn't mean that they're bidding all this work either. That's kind of what I was asking about what the different roles are. The roles really everything that Chad said, managing that customer, following up, making sure they're making sense of the data, keeping that relationship intact, but also facilitation of all actions from the team are required to do those functions,
Game on.
right?
Yes.
That might need to be, hey, this roof's expiring. My client needs a re-roof quote. Pass it off to estimating, right? Or hey, I need a sales rep to go out and measure this roof so I can pass it off to estimating. Or maybe the job's sold, but I want to make sure the customer's happy, so I need to keep a tie into production to make sure we're delivering. They are the conduit between your company and your customer. And I like the comparison that or the what you said about everybody wins. I love that in business because everybody should win. Nobody gets screwed. The customer wins because they get they get all the facts and they get to decide. The account manager wins because they get compensated likely based on the size of their portfolio. The company wins because you're doing the right thing, and as a byproduct of doing the right thing, you're earning a good living. So I love the scenarios where everybody wins. We're running a little long, and honestly, I don't even care if we're running a little bit long because this is such a cool topic. But what was I going to ask you? The tying it home to portfolio size, expansion of portfolio size, the duties of an account manager. How much can an account manager do? And that's probably a little bit of a loaded question, but at what point do you scale beyond one account manager into needing more? Or do you put more resources around the account manager so they can manage more? What's your thoughts on that?
Oh man, that is a loaded question and a baited question because there's not a perfect answer for it. I've tried a lot of different stuff. We've tried junior account managers. There
Mm,
are certain companies that have multiple people within the account, right? So they have like an East and a West division or something like that. How much can one person handle? Depends on how many accounts they have, right? Are they using Service Channel or can I just send a site bid to them? All of those different things come into play for where the account is, right? I've worked with different government entities that requires a breakdown on every single proposal, travel, labor, and materials, and then they want a breakout of materials, right? That proposal takes me 5 times longer to create than if I just created a site bid and sent it. Those are a lot of variables that come into it, and it makes it hard to understand what can an account manager do. I also feel that certain people have different capacities on what they can achieve. If you want an answer inside my head, 3 to 4 million in service revenue is I'll say what as I have found as the capacity for what one person can handle. But again, how kick ass is the process? How streamlined is the process? Because I've seen accounts where you can't get over 1 million inside service sales because they're just at capacity. So it's a really, really
Mhm.
hard question to ask because there's so many facets that go into certain companies that either make them easier or harder to hit that capacity level, I guess.
Well, that's why we ask you the hard questions,
So
so
thank
that
you.
as you go on your mind journey, you're picking apart all of well, I've seen this, seen that, and that's all great to share too, because
Yeah.
it's again going from, startup single location to, uh, a national presence where you're facilitating between an internal effort and multiple states, technicians. I need, project managers out there, roofs measured, back to a single location again. So it gives really good perspective. So we'll tie it up here because I want to pick through a little bit more, keep going, but I do got some work to do. How about you?
Yeah, 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 yeah. But I enjoy this. That's what I love about Fine Line Friday, man. We can pull back, we can work on the business, we can talk about, okay, did this work better? Did this work better? And I'm probably the number one person that like I'm just in the weeds. Sometimes I need to be pulled back. And that's what this does.
Yeah, that's when I call you twice in a row. Hey, yo, answer the
Right.
phone, man.
Right? One, you don't have to answer for Will. If he calls a second time, it's like, all right, something's up. No, I'm kidding.
Yep, end your call. Get off your call. Cool. Appreciate it as always. Next 2 weeks from now, another Fine Line Fridays. Catch you there. Thanks for
Yeah.
thanks for showing.
See you guys.